Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it's the love story.
It's iconic.
But let's be honest for a second. Sometimes it feels like Shakespeare is speaking a whole other language, like we need a translation just to figure out what's going on.
Definitely. The language can be a bit of a barrier for sure.
So for this deep dive, we're going back to a source, the original text. We're going to unpack the beginning of the play.
Act one.
Act 1, yeah, and a little bit of Act 2 as well, just to uncover some of those hidden gems and go beyond that surface level, the kind of stuff most people know about the play.
Yeah, because there's so much more to it than just star-crossed lovers.
Right, absolutely.
What's fascinating to me is that, yes, the language can feel a little, dated, but the themes of the play,
Hmm.
totally still relevant today. Love, hate, fate, family drama, it's all timeless stuff.
Oh, for sure. And Shakespeare doesn't waste any time throwing us into the drama. Like, right off the bat, the play opens with a street brawl, servants from the Montagues and the Capulets just going at it.
Yeah, they don't hold back.
It takes the prince practically threatening them to, get them to stop and restore some order.
Which tells you something about how intense this feud is, right?
It's serious business.
And the language Shakespeare uses in that opening scene, really powerful in terms of emphasizing how ridiculous this whole feud actually is.
Yeah, it's like they've been fighting for so long, no one even remembers why they're at each other's throats in the first place.
Right. He even calls it an ancient grudge right from the get-go.
Ancient grudge. Exactly.
Like, how old is this grudge, guys? Come on.
It makes you wonder how it even started. And then there's that line when the prince is intervening. He talks about 3 civil brawls bred of an airy word. That phrase, airy word, always gets me.
It's so evocative.
It really does. It just emphasizes how pointless the whole thing is.
Like, all this violence and hatred stemming from, what, practically nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's crucial because it shows us that this isn't just some abstract conflict,
Same.
Something happening in the background. This feud has very real consequences.
It does.
It dictates how these characters live, how they love.
Yeah, it shapes their entire world.
It's Shakespeare setting the stage for a world where those societal forces, even ones that might seem to be rooted in something as trivial as an airy word, can have a massive impact on individual lives.
That is so true.
Does that resonate with you at all?
It totally resonates. I mean, we see that even today, right? How societal pressures and expectations, how those things shape our choices, the things we do, the paths we take. Speaking of which, let's talk about our main man, Romeo. He's introduced pining over this girl, Rosaline, completely lovesick.
Head over heels.
But his language is so extra.
Little over the top.
Yeah. Oh, brawling love. Oh, loving hate. Feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health.
It's almost comical, don't you think? Well, you're right. It's definitely over the top. But you got to remember, Elizabethan audiences, they ate this stuff up. To them, this kind of wordplay, it was clever, it was entertaining.
That was the thing.
But there's another layer here, this, exaggerated heartache. It suggests that maybe Romeo's in love with the idea of love.
More than he's in love with, Rosalind herself.
Exactly. Not necessarily Rosaline herself.
That's fascinating. It's like he's playing the part of the heartbroken lover.
Exactly. Like he's read all the sonnets. He knows the role he's supposed to play.
And this is important because, he falls for Juliet pretty quickly, right?
Oh, yeah. He does a total 180.
So this kind of sets that up.
It does. Because we see Romeo is primed for a grand, all-consuming passion. It's like Shakespeare's winking at us, the audience, getting us ready for what's to come.
Okay, now that is some next-level storytelling.
Oh, this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of Shakespeare's craftsmanship, trust me.
So Romeo's moping around, consumed by this, melodramatic love for Rosaline, when he gets invited to this big Capulet party.
Which, talk about a recipe for disaster.
Right.
Montagues and Capulets. Not exactly best buds.
No, not at all. Initially, he's hesitant about going, but his friends, particularly Mercutio, convince him to go. And this leads us to one of the most bizarre and memorable speeches in the play, Queen Mab.
Ah, yes, Queen Mab, a personal favorite.
She's a what? Remind me.
She's this fascinating figure in folklore, this tiny fairy who controls people's dreams.
And Mercutio's whole speech about her is so I don't know, vivid and strange. It feels like it comes out of nowhere. Like it's so out there, it's easy to get lost in the whimsy of it all.
It does seem like a tangent, yeah.
Yeah.
But Shakespeare, he rarely inserts anything without a purpose.
Right, right. Everything's there for a reason.
On the surface, it's just Mercutio. Classic Mercutio, loves to hear himself talk, indulging in some fanciful storytelling.
Hmm.
But if we dig a little deeper,
There's always something more going on with Shakespeare, right?
always.
So what's going on here?
Well, this Queen Mab speech, when you really look at it closely, it's actually full of foreshadowing.
Oh, really? See, I didn't catch that.
It's subtle, but it's there. It hints at some of the play's darker themes: dreams versus reality, fate versus free will, the dangers of desire, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And it definitely foreshadows the tragic turn that the lover's story is going to take.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just a fun little story. It's like, oh, warning.
It's like a subtle warning, yeah,
Yeah.
whispering beneath the surface of this whole party atmosphere.
Man, Shakespeare's good.
The best.
So Romeo, maybe he's trying to shake off the Queen Mab vibes. He finally enters the party.
And runs straight into Juliet.
Talk about a way to kill a mood.
Well, actually, it's quite the opposite.
Right, because
Right.
he's like immediately smitten.
Instantly, head over heels. And the way Shakespeare describes Juliet, it's clear he's pulling out all the stops.
Oh, yeah, it's romantic with a capital R. He compared her to a source of light. Like she's radiating beauty. It's all very sparkly.
He says, "She doth teach the torches to burn bright."
Okay, that's a good line.
Right. He's totally awestruck,
Yeah.
placing her on a pedestal. But, and this is something I find interesting,
What's that?
at this point, his descriptions of Juliet,
Yeah.
they're very focused on her physical appearance.
So he's struck by her beauty, but we don't really see him engaging with her personality yet.
Precisely. And that's a really crucial observation, because it speaks to the nature of their relationship, at least at this early stage. It's passionate. It's intense. But it also highlights how much of it is built on Romeo's kind of idealized vision of Juliet, rather than, a deep understanding of who she really is as a person.
So it makes you wonder, like, what would have happened if they'd actually had a chance to, to talk, to get to know each other a little, before diving headfirst into this whole whirlwind romance.
That's the question, isn't it? That's the question for the ages.
Right.
And it speaks to the timelessness of this play,
Right.
Like, we still grapple with these questions today.
Mm-hmm.
Love, infatuation, the weight of those societal expectations, all of it.
Totally. And speaking of iconic scenes, let's talk about that balcony scene. It's the scene that everyone knows, even if they've never picked up the play.
Romeo, oh Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?
Exactly. It's practically a cultural touchstone at this point.
It's true. One of the most famous scenes in all of literature.
I know you said the Queen Mab speech was your favorite, but I mean, come on, this one's got to be up there.
Okay, you're right, it's a close second.
So what's interesting about it to you?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that even people who haven't read the play recognize it,
Mm-hmm.
because it speaks to the power of Shakespeare's language, right?
Totally.
But what I think often gets overlooked is that in this scene, Shakespeare gives Juliet, he gives her much more agency, much more depth than Romeo.
Oh, interesting. You're right. She's not just passively professing her love.
Exactly. She's grappling with some serious stuff here. The weight of their family's history, the societal barriers that divide them.
Yeah, like when she asks, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
Yeah.
She's not just being romantic.
No, she's not.
She's questioning the very foundation of the feud that's keeping them apart.
Exactly. Which is huge.
It's huge.
Think about the context, right? She's challenging centuries of tradition, of ingrained animosity, just with that one question.
She's a rebel.
She is. And I think she's displaying a level of awareness, a maturity, that I think sometimes gets overshadowed by the passionate declarations of love in that scene.
That's a good point, because we do tend to focus on the romance of it all.
Right, in the drama. But there's a real depth to Juliet and to her thinking. And it raises an important question. Is Romeo on the same page? Is he capable of that same level of critical thinking? Or is he still blinded by this, like, whirlwind romance? What do you think?
That is such a good question, because their next decision definitely throws a wrench into things.
Let me guess.
They
They decide to elope.
Well, they decide to get married, which basically amounts to the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Given the circumstances.
true,
And it happens like right then and there. It is incredibly impulsive.
to say the least.
So help me out here, because I'm torn. Do you think this speaks to true love? Or is it just like youthful passion, a bit of naivete?
Well, I think that's the brilliance of Shakespeare.
What do you mean?
He presents this whole whirlwind courtship, this rapid escalation from love at first sight to, like, clandestine marriage in a way that manages to be both incredibly romantic and completely reckless.
Yeah, it's both at the same time.
Right. And it's left open to interpretation. Every audience member is going to have a different reaction. Some people are going to be swept up in the romance of it all. Others are going to be like, guys, pump the brakes. What are you doing?
And I love that Shakespeare can still do that to us, you know?
Centuries later.
Centuries later.
It's amazing.
It is. So then, to add even more drama to the mix, Romeo rushes off to Friar Lawrence and drops this bombshell on him. Like, hey, Friar, we need to get married, like now.
And Friar Lawrence is, of course, completely taken aback.
Oh, I bet. I'd love to have seen his face.
I imagine his reaction is pretty much what any reasonable person would feel. If someone they knew came to them with this plan.
Right. Like, hold on, slow your roll.
Exactly. Total shock. Probably a healthy dose of skepticism. But he agrees to marry them.
He does, which, I mean, he's trying to help, but
But it's a risky move.
to say the least. And that decision, even though it's made with the best of intentions, he wants to heal the rift between the families. It really highlights the friar's role as a somewhat flawed mentor figure in the play.
Definitely. He's making this decision based on hope. A desire for a peaceful resolution,
Yeah.
but not necessarily with a lot of practical forethought,
Yeah, he's putting a lot of faith in the power of love to conquer all.
which, spoiler alert,
Doesn't exactly pan out the way he'd hoped.
not even close.
No. Because soon after, we have that pivotal encounter between Romeo, Mercutio, and Tybalt.
Where, despite his best attempts to avoid a confrontation,
Things go very, very wrong.
to put it mildly,
Shakespeare really knows how to ratchet up the tension.
he's the master.
Mercutio's death, it's like a turning point in the play. It's impossible to go back to the lighthearted banter, the playful courtship, all that.
Everything changes in that moment.
It's just so dark.
It's a brutal reminder of what's really at stake here. This isn't just a game, you know.
No, it's not. And the fact that it's Mercutio, the character who seemed most full of life, you know?
Always the life of the party.
Exactly. He becomes a casualty.
It makes it all the more tragic, right?
It does. It really does.
Because it shows how quickly things can spiral out of control.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got all this passion, all this hatred flying around.
And Romeo, he makes a choice in that moment, too. To avenge Mercutio. To kill Tybalt.
Which, of course, has huge repercussions.
It seals his fate, really.
It does. He ends up banished from Verona.
Which, I mean, on the surface, it seems like a more merciful punishment than death, right?
Right. It could have been a lot worse, given the circumstances.
But for Romeo being separated from Juliet, unthinkable. Devastating.
He even threatens suicide.
Which really highlights his youth.
What do you mean?
Well, he's seeing the world in absolutes, you know? To him, life without Juliet, it's not even worth living.
Oh, he's dramatic.
He's all in, that's for sure.
And then there's Juliet. I mean, she's hit with this double whammy. Her cousin's dead, and her new husband is banished.
Talk about a bad week.
Right, and her reaction is heartbreaking.
She goes through it in this scene.
One minute she's furious with Romeo, calling him, like, a beautiful tyrant, fiend angelical.
It's intense.
And then the next she's defending him, saying, "Shall I speak ill of him that is my husband? I mean, make up your mind."
She's utterly torn, and I think this is where we really see Juliet's strength. Her complexity as a character. She's experiencing this profound grief.
For Tybalt. Yeah, but she's also wrestling with these conflicting loyalties.
To her family and to Romeo.
Exactly.
And neither Romeo nor Juliet is thinking straight at this point.
No, not at all. They're both a mess.
And, unfortunately, the adults in their lives, not much help either.
Yeah, the friar, bless his heart.
He tries so hard.
He does. He really does. Tries to come up with a plan.
Keyword,
Tries.
but it's a risky one.
That's putting it mildly.
The fake death potion. Yeah, not exactly a foolproof plan.
You think?
It's a testament to how desperate the situation has become.
Yeah. Everyone's just grasping at straws at this point.
And it speaks to this theme of fate versus free will that runs through the play, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Are these characters in control of their destinies? Or are they caught in this web spun by forces beyond their control? It does feel like one bad decision after another. is leading them down this, like, tragic path.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, like, what do you think would have happened if Romeo had gotten that message? You know, the one from Friar Lawrence, explaining that Juliet wasn't actually dead.
Ah, the million-dollar question. What if?
Right. It's all about the what ifs.
It's a testament to the power of Shakespeare's storytelling, right? That centuries later, we're still grappling with these questions.
It's true. We are.
And it's what makes this play so endlessly fascinating, don't you think?
I totally agree. It's a reminder that even the most well-intentioned plans, they can go so wrong.
Yeah.
And that sometimes, even in the face